Okay, stream is starting. Gonna post announcements. Hello. I'll post one announcement. Post the other one. Here we go. And one more. Let's see. Live streams, there we go. Hello. Hello everyone. Wow. So should be live. I'm gonna make sure everything's going. We've got Dusty Sprinkles going woof woof. Hello. Oh my god, Gardic is already asking Schnappet. It takes no time at all. So hello everyone, I'm Froox. I'm here today alone. Unfortunately Cyrus is indisposed today. But this is the Resonance. It's essentially my kind of like office hour slash podcast, where you can ask any questions about Resonite, whether it's technical, whether it's, philosophy of the platform, how it's going, like what do we want it to do in the future, how the team's working on things, whatever you want to ask, related to the Resonite, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to kind of answer those questions. Some of them I might just give you very general answer and redirect to other parts, like for example the moderation office hours that happened about an hour before this one, because they know the better equipped to ask certain questions, if there is not a lot of moderation stuff and so on. But you're always free to ask whatever you want. Make sure if you're gonna ask a question, put a question mark in it. That way it kind of pops on my thing here. That way, I don't miss it in the flow of the chat and everything. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I think we should get started. There's some questions from the Discord, so I'll probably go through these first. Let some of the questions pile up in the chat. So, let's see. So the first question is Red is asking, do you know the Protoflux binding for peg, unpeg, SH3, float 3, cause I can't figure it out. Unlike every other binding in the game, it seems to be just simple Froox engine. I'm not really sure what do you mean by that. The bindings, the spherical harmonics and float 3, they're defined in the element's core. So it's pretty much that, it goes in there. Yeah, it's elements core, it's one of our libraries that kind of contains a lot of kind of base math stuff. The vector types, quaternion tabs, matrices, the new spherical harmonics is defined in elements core. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're asking for, but that's how I kind of interpreted it. The next question is Solo is asking, is it possible now or in the future to be able to map controller to a character or object in Resonite? For example, I import vehicle or character that I can control in Resonite with game controller, racing wheel, etc. In the future, yes. Right now we don't have super much exposed in terms of gamepad or racing wheels. There's two ways to kind of approach these kinds of systems. One of them, we kind of give you direct access. So you essentially just read out whatever the gamepad's giving, read out whatever the racing wheel is giving, and you just work directly with those devices. The problem is it kind of places the burden on you, to make sure it supports all the different controllers. It's somewhat similar right now if you have the controllers, the Protoflux nodes for specific controllers, there's one that gives you specifically all the index stuff, one that gives you Oculus Touch stuff, one that gives you a mixed reality, Vivant, and so on. That kind of gives you very direct access to the controller, but also if you build something with those, then it doesn't work with the other controllers, and if a new type of controller comes in, your item just doesn't work with those. And I've kind of seen those, when people build, item for their controller, and it makes it so it doesn't work for anybody who uses a different controller, which is, is not very future-proof in a way. So the better way to kind of handle it is sort of like, standardized the input system. There's the standard controller, which sort of offers like a subset that all the controllers can map to. So that's like, a useful fallback if none of the controllers are supported. And we probably want to do something similar with the input system where there's this kind of approach that Steam input is using where instead of defining, specific specific controller mappings, you define sort of actions that kind of, feed into your thing, and then different controllers and devices can be mapped to those, which means the bindings, essentially kind of separates the process. For example, with the example of the vehicle, say you have an input like, accelerate and brake, and you have like, analog input that's like, steer, which is like, could be like one-dimensional value. And that's like, all the vehicle cares about. It needs those inputs, but it doesn't care how it gets them. And then it's, up to the input system to be like, okay, I'm gonna map this. The user has, this gamepad. I'm gonna map this button, to accelerate. I'm gonna map, or maybe I'm gonna map the trigger to accelerate because it's like, analog value. I'm gonna map like, the steering wheel to the steer, or maybe I'm gonna map keys to the steering. And usually, like when you make an item like that, it would provide some common bindings for things, but it kind of opens up the possibility for users to like, create their own mappings. So you'd probably want to like, introduce a system like that that's gonna make it like much more future-proof and much easier to customize those kinds of systems. I'm gonna mention one thing you can use. One of the things like you can use, it doesn't give you direct access, but like it makes it a little bit more future-proof, is also use the anchors. Because avatar anchors, they give you some inputs for the user when they're in the anchor. And if you use those, that's already using the generalized system, so it will kind of keep working with different devices. But yeah, that's pretty much, hopefully that kind of covers this like well enough. The next question is from World Theory. Do you have checklist you look for streams to check for something related to problems before starting, like checking OBS settings for reset preferences? I'm looking at you, video bitrate, or microphone settings that tend to mess up. Yeah, I usually just do like a very quick test because there's not like super many things. Like I just like, prepare all the messages, make sure like, that's updated, check the microphone because I can see the level. So I just do like, quick mic check if Cyrus like in. And then I check like the application audio capture. It tends to be pretty stable, doesn't usually break. I don't like change the settings super much often, so like it's relatively stable. But there's like a few things I always kind of check, like make sure it's all kind of okay. The next question is from OZ. One that just popped in my head. What is functional difference between fire on true and local user attached and local fire on true? I know it's suggested to use the latter, but I wonder exactly why. Well, they actually do different things. So if we use the global fire on true node, the global nodes, they will try to deduplicate impulses. Like they it's almost like, they're checking potential changes from everyone, and if somebody changes, they will like remember who changed it, and if another user like has the same value changed, it'll just kind of ignore it. If you plug specific user, you're essentially telling it only check changes on this user. This user is the one who's responsible for tracking the changes of the value. If you see the change on the value on someone else, ignore it. But that also can change dynamically. And that's the important bit. It checks it for one specific user. What the local fire on true does, it fires on change that it observes locally. Which means like it doesn't care about any kind of deduplication. So if you have local fire on true and you have a synchronized value, and that value changes for everyone, it's not like a driven value that you're changing only for a specific user, it changes for everyone. Every single user is going to fire an impulse because every single user has observed that value to have changed. Which means we have like, 10 users in the session, you're going to get, 10 impulse firings. If you use the global fire on true with specific user, you're only gonna get one total impulse, even if you have 10 users in the session, because you're telling it only track the changes on this user. I don't know why people would suggest one over the other, because they have different behavior. So it's not necessarily that you want to use one over the other. It depends on what you're doing. If you want every user to do, some actions when the value changes, then you want to use the local one, because each user kind of does independently, a bunch of actions. But if you only want one user to, if something changes and you want only one user to handle change, then use the first one. Use the global one with the user plugged in. So it depends, how you're structuring your system. If you use the local one and you kind of expect it to work similar, you might actually be, causing subtle kind of maybe corruption in your system, because now we have every single user on the change of that value executing all of that code, which might end up messing up its state, because now they'll try to override each other changes. So they're different things. I hope that this kind of explains how they're different. But essentially think of them with the global one, you plug specific user. Actually, no, wait. I'm sorry. You specified local user. Okay, I misinterpreted it. So if you plug the local user into that, then yes, you don't want to do that, because you're essentially telling. If you plug the local user into the node, you're essentially telling you're telling the node that the local user, who for everyone that's them, is the one who's supposed to be tracking the changes and not anyone else. So if you do that thing, you essentially make every user think they are the only user who's supposed to be tracking changes, but it's not actually true, because every user thinks that. So every user essentially thinks they have the exclusive control of tracking the changes, and they will try to track the changes, and they will start overwriting each other's change. So for example, if the node observes a value on one user change, but it is not on the other, the user is going to be, okay, the value changed, this is what the last value is. And it overrides what the value is for another user, the last observed one, and the user is going to be, wait, this value has changed, so I'm going to fire it, and also store the new changed value. And now we changed it for the other user, it's going to be, oh wait, the value actually changed, and it's going to fire it. And essentially you can have the node just be firing endlessly, because they just keep overwriting each other's changes. So yes, if you plug in specifically the local user, don't do that with these nodes, because they're essentially global nodes, and you're trying to make them local. So the local fire on true, it doesn't do any kind of tracking between the users. It so you don't get the users overwriting each other's change. So sorry, I kind of missed that one part, specifically with the local user. So I do agree that one you don't want to use. You want to use the local fire on through, in that case, if you want every user firing. Otherwise, the node is just gonna cause a lot of mess. So that's all the questions from Discord. So I'm gonna move to the ones from the Twitch chat. There's a few that already popped in. Oop, and I'm pulling them out by accident. Oh, also I forgot to mention, I'm streaming from the creator, the MMC world. I was I saw Meta stream, and they were going this world. I'm this is kind of nice world to stream from. It's kind of nice and calm and fluffy, and I'm literally coming to you from the cloud. So you can check it out. It's published in the worlds tab. Claric is also asking Schnopit. I actually have one thing, so Schnopit, is a thing that make you disintegrate, and one thing I wanted to mention last week and I forgot about it, is when people, when we're prioritizing issues, and say there's multiple big things to work on, and we're okay, which one are we gonna work on? And people will ask, why not both? Just work on both of them. And it's one of those things where it feels people don't understand, things take time, and things take focus when you're developing something. And if you have, if you have like two big, say two things that each take 10 hours to do, and you want to like make one in a day. If you wanted to make both of them, you would need at least 20 hours because each one takes 10 hours. Like you cannot make them. You cannot like work on two parallel things at the same time. It's kind of like it's like trying to like be painting an image while at the same time soldering some kind of like circuitry, like just doing both at the same time. Like you're not really gonna be able to do two complex tasks like that, and have them each take like 10 hours. You have to kind of do them in sequence. You can interweave them, but if you do that, oftentimes in programming you switch focus a lot. There's a bit of an overhead because like to work on something, kind of need to get into the headspace, to think about it. And if you suddenly switch focus to something else, all of that goes away, and you need to kind of refocus on it again. So if you wanted to do like 1 hour of task A, 1 hour of task B, 1 hour of task A, 1 hour of task B, and just kind of interweave them like that, you're probably gonna make, instead of 10 hours, now they're gonna take like 15 hours or 20 hours each, and you haven't really like saved any time. You just made it cost more. So oftentimes like just doing them in sequence is the most efficient way to do it, but it means you have to pick which one you work on first. And in general, that's like one of the things I kind of run into is like where people don't realize that like priorities, they have like a cost of time, and the amount of time we have is limited. So we need to decide like what fits into that limited schedule, and that means some things will not make the cut. And I feel like a lot of times like it's kind of struggle because like feels like some people don't understand that. They kind of think like everything cannot be worked on at once, and it can be a bit frustrating sometimes. So that answers the Schnopit question. I'm gonna get to the more serious ones now. At least I hope they're more serious. I haven't read them yet. Dusty Sprinkles is asking, as a question, you recently made issue about making custom components with Protoflex, and that made me think, would that or its direct prerequisite, packed Protoflex nodes allow packing components as well as flex nodes? And if not, would there be any plans for it in future? Maybe. I don't know what you mean by packing components, because like they're already essentially packed, like because most of the components they're like compiled code. So like they don't really have any representation that you could pack, like they're as packed as they could be. Like it doesn't really make sense like to like think about concept of packing in terms of component. Like it doesn't really. I don't really know like what do you imagine like packing components actually doing? Like what would that do? Because that's the part I'm not understanding. With Protoflex, it kind of makes sense to pack things because you have like this kind of dynamic representation of like the internals of it, where you have like a bunch of nodes and you kind of connecting them, dynamically changing them, and it's good like for like building them out. But the Protoflex doesn't actually need it for its function. So when you pack it, you kind of like you take all the development interface away because it's no longer needed. You can just disregard the data, and like packing them into static assets essentially gets rid of that. It gets rid of like that kind of dynamic data for editing them. But the components, they don't have that in the first place, so like it doesn't really make much sense to like pack them because like they're kind of like packed by default and they cannot be unpacked in the first place. So if you clarify the question, I can like explain a bit more, but in this way it doesn't like make super much like sense to me, like what it would mean. Reneko is asking for a flex tip. I'm not sure what that was in context of. If you're asking a follow-up question, please include like the whole context that way, because like I'm kind of going through like when there's like chat happening, I only see like the question bits and like I don't know like like what that was for. The next question from Redneko. The standard ones work, but nested SH I can't figure out. I'm not really sure. I'm not like fully sure like what they're trying to do. Like it might be like there's like a lot of like limitations on like which types you can make, so it just might be the types you're trying to make are not permitted. There's actual limitation on the size, of the data types you can make, because if it's above certain size, it just makes the runtime explode. And it's generally a very bad idea to do, because like if you're working with value types, usually like you want to keep these small to be efficient, and I think kind of bigger should generally be a class, something that's more dynamically kind of expandable. And like if you already like, say, I think like the limit is currently 4 kilobytes, which for value types is already like way over the limit, like of what's reasonable. So you can kind of make them, but like if it's anything above that, the system will just reject it. The next question is from Derek Kiovo. As a game developer, what have been your biggest struggles while developing Resonite so far? Are there any processes you regretted going through? I mean, there's a bunch. That's a difficult one. I feel like it was like one of those things like where the reasons I give you are gonna depend on what I'm currently dealing with at the time, because like there's gonna be more pressure on the mind. Which one would be good to start with? I mean, so definitely one of the difficult things is that Resonite is a very big and ambitious project, and it requires a lot of time. So like, and the biggest part is, making sure that like as we kind of keep going, that like we essentially get enough funding to kind of continue working on the big goals, because we have like plans for, big features like years down the line. Like I don't think we'll ever run out of like, things to do. Like Resonite like is a very long-term project, but at the same time we have to make sure, we have those years to work on those things. And we can kind of, keep growing the company. And oftentimes, like, finding the balance between that, it can be difficult, because sometimes you have to, take some projects you really don't want to, but they're kind of needed for the company to survive, to kind of get over, like, a financial hump or something like that. But oftentimes, like, like some of those goals, they can, like, work against your more longer term goals, or they can harm your company in some other ways, and you don't always see that ahead of time. You don't know how some things are gonna work out. So definitely making sure, like, we kind of keep going, that's like one of the big things. Like, that's definitely a struggle. Like, we have fraction of resources that like a lot of other companies do, in big part because we don't really want to like end up in a situation where we have to give away, we have to like give the control away of the project, because this happens for a lot of startups. A lot of them will they will sell so much equity just to fund the company, that essentially they end up like with minority shares, and they no longer actually have technical control over the company. So like at some point they get pushed out, the company gets taken over by people who are not fully aligned with the product. They're not they're not there because of the passion for the project. They're there to make money out of it, and it kind of starts slowly over time, subtly changing the goals. So when we kind of deal with things, like we are more picky. Like we will avoid like certain projects, but it's also like sometimes ones that are not necessarily super harmful, but also like they're a bit of like distractions. And then like we're like, do we take this one, do we not take this one? We kind of like need this one to like develop this relationship, or like cover this like financial period. So it becomes difficult, because you have to like you have to kind of weigh those things. At least when we do it like this way, one of the benefits is like when we do projects, say for other businesses, other companies, we're not giving like control of the company away, because like we're still keeping the company. At any point, we can just be, we're stopping to work, we don't want to work with you. like that's always a possibility. It would, all of the times it wouldn't be a good idea, but like, we still technically like in control of the project. That said, there's a number of partners that like we do like working with because they do like really cool things with the project. And we want to, focus on those kinds of relationships, make sure that people that we work with are the ones, that are kind of aligned with our goals and that like we're both kind of excited about what we're doing. So we kind of like, try to focus on building those, while the ones that like, are not well aligned with us, like we'll try to like stay away from. But sometimes you have to also make compromises with us kind of thing, and it's, there is definitely like kind of like one of the kind of struggles. Is in part like it also kind of splits your focus sometimes. So like depends, what kind of projects come by, because sometimes, we find really good ways to align the focus. We're like, okay, we're working on these things already, or like we're working on something that's, related, which means, like there's a lot of synergy there. Like for example, recently, like we had there's like a company like that actually is interested in Resonite, and we're actually really excited about photon dust. And there's like a thing like we implemented, so like, there's like a really good like way for collaborate, because we can, it's already like we don't need to like essentially take a detour for things. It's kind of aligned with things we're working on, and we want to do more stuff like that, where it just kind of ends up like, like being aligned with our goals. There's also like other parts, like there's one of the struggles for me that is kind of like deal like pretty frequently. It can be kind of dealing with like a lot of the kind of requests and feedback, because like we're very open with the development, and like, we kind of like talk about everything working, like we release things early. We want like, we want to have that like, direct feedback loop, instead of, taking, half a year or a year to like develop a new update and then, get feedback. Like we try to like do pre-releases, release things like into the builds and then polish them over upcoming builds, because there's a huge benefit from that, because, we get feedback very like early in the process, and, and it kind of helps polish it out rather than like, us polishing it internally and then showing the result. So there's a huge benefit like, to building like that. We're very community based, and a lot of the priorities they end up stemming from what people ask for, or what we see that, people need in the community. Like for example, recently, I've added the invite request, which was also a request from community, and a bunch of upvotes, and also like it seemed like there was kind of like a need for it, and I got like, kind of good idea how to approach it, and it wasn't super big project, so I was like, okay, like we need to do this to help out the community, help out the social aspect of it. It helps like, break things a bit from like, the big kind of performance focus as well. But sometimes like, there's like the negative side of it, because like there can be a lot of it's almost like micromanagement from the community, like where people are like, like should be working on this, we should be working on this. Why, like sometimes people are like get upset about like, certain things. They're like, why was this thing added? Like why are you spending time on this? And the thing, it costs like 5 minutes to add, and it's like, do we really need to be like, having this discussion over like, something so tiny, like, and it's kind of like wears you out a bit. So it can also be, people, like I feel a lot of times like, people when they ask for something, they see the thing they want, and that to them is the most important thing in the world that the Resonite needs. Whereas like, from our perspective, like we see hundreds or thousands of like, these things, and where people are requesting this and this and that, and like you talk to a bunch of different people, and every person is gonna tell you there's like a different thing that the Resonite needs to be doing right now, otherwise it will die, or something. And it just kind of ends up feeling like kind of being, pulled apart like in a million different directions, because everybody kind of wants something different. Everybody needs that to be like a priority, and that like ends up contributing a little bit like, to like burnout and stress, and which kind of like then slows down the development a fair bit. So that's definitely also like one of the challenges. It's always like the way I kind of think about it is, doing development like this way is like a double-edged sword. So there's like huge benefits to it. There's also like some drawbacks. And we try to like eliminate the drawbacks as much as we can, but it can be difficult at times. That said, like I still think like it's the benefits kind of outweigh the negatives. Making Resonite very community kind of focused, making it because if we work on what people need and what people want, we essentially end up like empowering the community. And usually when we prioritize, we're like, that's one of the things that will also come into that. We'll be like, what kind of impact is this gonna have on the community? Is it gonna, let everyone, be kind of happier in Resonite? Is it that people are gonna build more cool content? Is it gonna bring more people? Is it gonna make more people? Is it gonna make people, easier? Is it gonna make it easier for them to stay on the platform or get, hooked? So that kind of helps because, like, I notice, with some like big companies, they don't like, it's like they get like too abstracted from that, and then don't make like decisions that necessarily are super aligned, and like ends up like hurting them in the long term. And they can kind of like, I feel, sometimes compensate just by being big and doing lots of marketing and so on and getting people on, but we're very small. We have very limited funding, like literally a fraction of like what other companies like have for developing similar things. And we're still able to kind of go on, add all of these features, do like all of these cool things. And as in part because we are focused on the community, and because like we focus on developing as efficiently as we can. But the process can definitely kind of be like quite stressful at the times. But yeah, so probably like the big ones. Sometimes there's like a lot of like kind of smaller things. You also mentioned, are there any processes you regretted going through? There's a bunch. It actually kind of relates, to the thing, with the community, like people wanting to, because there's been a few features and few changes in the past that I made that I wasn't originally, like, either I was like, this is just going to be a quick thing, it's going to be replaced later, or like people like really wanted it, like they wanted it now, so I kind of caved in and I added it in some form. Like, that was kind of simplified, like, because like people would be like, oh, just do like, do a very simple version of it, do like a minimal version. The problem is oftentimes that ends up causing like way more trouble than it's worth, and it ends up costing more time than it would have really taken, to just make it do it properly. There's the saying, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution. So nowadays, like, I'm very, like, when people request, like, just, oh, do a quick version of this feature, like, just a quick one, I usually reject it because it's caused a lot of trouble in the past, and a lot of them are actually still causing trouble now, costing us, time and sanity that's taken from other features. So oftentimes I will kind of regret those choices, and I will not want to make them again. Because even so, like, it would kind of help for the time being, it would cause a lot of problems, going forward. So like, and there's another thing, where people don't realize that like things they ask for, even though the initial change might be quick, say like it takes 5 minutes to implement something. I feel a lot of times people will not realize that everything you do, everything you add or change, it has a maintenance cost. Because if it's something you can build on, like say we add like a new node or change how some node behaves, now we need to make sure that node essentially keeps working the way it is forever. Because if you ever change it, now whatever you build with it is gonna break. So we'll be very hesitant to make those decisions when there's, when we're not confident we can preserve its behavior long term. And I feel there's like a lot of times like people don't understand that aspect, they're like, why don't you add this? It takes 5 minutes to add, in a mod. And it's oftentimes it's because of this kind of maintenance burden. It's because like you can't just add something, you have to support it, and you have to support it for potentially forever, which, it adds up over time, so we kind of need to be careful about how we do things. And oftentimes, we'll do them in a more structured, robust way that's designed for good, long-term support. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. There's some other things also, when things kind of how to kind of approach certain things, for example, doing some of the testing, doing some of the releases and so on, but they kind of become complicated because oftentimes there's just lots of kind of forces acting on things and things pulling you and pressures and so on, and it makes things difficult sometimes. But I hope this kind of answers the question. I was kind of rambling about this one for quite a bit, but hopefully it kind of gives you kind of better insight. Next question. Game the Capdog is asking, could Resonite support custom screen controllers in the future for say custom game modes that require more control over how input is handled? I'm not sure what you mean by screen controllers exactly. Is it like a touch screen? Or do you mean just the gamepads? Because I did answer questions about the gamepads earlier. It was about that. It was about that, and like I mentioned earlier, we would have a system where you essentially specify actions you want on certain item and allow the bindings to be defined outside of that. If it's in something else, then send another question with clarification and answer that. Shadow X is asking what's the status on 3DGS. It's actually gonna come out, I've been kind of doing a little bit more work. I posted a devlog, fixing up some more things with the Gaussian splitting, so I think I'll probably release the initial version of it sometime this upcoming week. I just still do want to add, because Gaussian splats, they're very memory hungry. They will, a 3 million splat will eat a gig of your VRAM easily. So one thing I do want to add is a method where they're compressed in VRAM for rendering, so they can take their size and make it much smaller. But it's now with Photon Dust done, with Stripe done, with some of the cleanup, I really want to finish this part up and release it. So it's probably gonna be out very soon. Next question. Specs Snowshoe. I am seeing an increasing number of avatars for sale that support expression tracking. It seems common for avatars to include blend shapes supporting more than one standard. This can cause strange conflicts and mix-up assignments with attempting to outstyle expressions. Do you have thoughts on how you may want to improve expression heuristics to avoid such problems? Yeah, so what I would do for that is, we would look at what standards are there. And because right now, the heuristics, it kind of looks at the expressions kind of one by one for the most part. It's kind of some extra logic, but it's kind of looking at specific ones. It might need extra pass where it kind of detects, okay, does this standard exist, does this standard exist, and figures out, okay, there's these multiple standards, and then makes high level decision. I'm gonna pick this standard because this has the best features, the most blend shapes and so on, and then it only assigns ones that belong to that standard, and it's gonna ignore all the others. So I think that would be probably the best way to kind of handle it. I would need to see some of the standards, the namings, how they kind of work, to kind of figure out exact details of it. But yeah, it's a solvable problem if it uses any consistent kind of naming, which on itself can be a problem sometimes, but it's hard for me to say specifically without knowing the exact details. So I would probably suggest making a GitHub issue on it, and so we can kind of have a look on how to improve it. Navy 3001. With the world-in-world system, can worlds prevent other worlds from joining their world? I'm not sure what exactly do you mean. So do you mean the domain system, or the layer system? Because with the domain system, we do want to have, so like, you can have like a domain join like another. I mean, the system is like not like, it's like sort of like, high level concept like right now. So there's like, no details like that, but it very likely have, a method to prevent that or enable that. So, probably yes. But like now it's way too early, That is assuming, that's what you meant. Like if you're talking about like, different thing, like let me know. And next question, I think what Dusty means is making custom components to do a thing with other components, but hiding the components away for one reason or another. Was your choice in that case? Hiding them, like is like, what do you mean, like an obfuscation or something? Like, I mean, like you could just like have like a flag that says don't display this component, but like, I I don't know like what we would gain from that. Like, like it would be like some basic level of obfuscation if somebody just opens it up, but also it's, like it would be easy to like get around it because the component's still there. It's still like doing things. So like I don't think it would be really worth like engineering time. Martish asking, how did Froox Engine start? What were some of the earliest features? So it actually kind of started as like multiple things that kind of like, converged into one. And some of them like date like really like way back. Like there's like little bits where, like all the way back, like when I was still like, in secondary school, which is like a high school sort of, like specialized high school. I was working, like designing like this game engine called, I think it was called Sirit or something like that. It had like a lot of kind of like, high level concepts on, like dynamic stuff and loading things and managing things and so on. I've done stuff with like architectural design. I was like working on, experimental processor architectures, and it required like multiple levels of abstraction. And then when I got my Oculus, I started like working on educational sort of like applications. And one of my big inspiration was a book called Free to Learn by Peter Gray. Like at the time, I was like a relatively fresh like dropout from college because I I went to like, I went to like the secondary school, and then I like, went to like college because like that's kind of what everybody did. Um, but like I was there like, for the first semester, and I just kind of like hated it because like I had to like do a lot of things I already knew how to do, and I was like, this is not really bringing me any benefit. I don't like any of this. And I kind of like, and I was already like at the time I was like working on my own projects, making money like with contract software development. So I decided to kind of drop it and go on my own. Um, and it's like, and I kind of like, it made me kind of think, about like education and so on and how things kind of work, because I'm a very self-educated person. I love like learning stuff. So I started like going into a lot more of that, and I found a book, Free to Learn by Peter Gray. He's a he's essentially like a psychologist who studies how we learn, how we like, teach each other. And he wrote this book where he collected a lot of research into that. And one of the like key takeaways from his book is that like, we learn the best socially by, freely kind of exploring. And that kind of gave me, the idea, like, like where I wanted to build sort of like a universe where, you can freely explore it. And as you explore it, you learn about things. And not only you can, explore it on your own, you can, explore it with others. But the other important part is that you'll be also able to like expand the universe. To be like universe kind of built by everyone. So you would essentially like, it was kind of like meant to be like this kind of like, eduverse, like where like you can learn together, you can explore together, you can, learn from each other, which was kind of, following the research, from that book. and wanting to kind of, empower that kind of process. And I used like a lot of the ideas, from like the engine work and so on to start like designing an engine that would be capable like of doing that, and while at the same time kind of, building some of the like educational experiences. But like one of the things that like bugged me is like, a lot of them kind of, they were like using pieces of it, they were like pieces of the engine were kind of like being used in the different things, but it was still kind of fragmented. So at some point, I kind of tied them into like one. And over time, I also realized, this is more general than just education. This can be used, pretty much for anything. And the scope kind of expanded from there. And it's still like, nowadays it's like used for education as well. But like, the cool thing is, a lot of people come to Resonite to, just play and have fun. But they're actually learning things as well, because like a lot of times we'll see people, they want to build a cool thing, they want to build a gadget, or like, some vehicle or some game, or a cool thing for their avatar. And there's been a number of times where like I've seen people learning, like complex mathematical concepts to be able to build their stuff. There's like I remember like one moment like where a bunch of like relatively late teen kind of like users, they were studying linear algebra because they wanted to make it a thing. And it's one of those things, like if a lot of people, when you learn it at a school, people are like, what is this for, like why are we learning this, and it's kind of like hard, so like make people interested in it. And then on here, they actually start doing the research, they start like figuring it out because they have a drive, they have like a motivation to do that. And there's like things like that that make me like really happy, because even though our focus is broader, it still helps, people learn cool skills. And the social aspect, people like to show how they do things, they learn from each other. Like if somebody builds something cool, we can join them in session and be like, oh, like, they can do this, or I can do this thing, and I can make this thing work. And that's like the exact thing from the book by Peter Gray. It's just kind of happening naturally, which was one of his like, big points of his book. Is like if people are left to their own devices, people are actually really capable of like, learning things without being forced to do so. Like, they don't need a school. They don't need a school, to be like, you need to learn this thing and you need to learn this thing. And in the book, like, he kind of makes a comparison where the traditional school system is more like a factory. It's like, you kind of go through it, you get like standardized tests, and, you get graded, and at the end of the school, you're like a finished, standardized, product that has learned this thing. And it's very like mechanical and kind of works against our nature. Like, people still get through it, people still learn things, but like it's not in our nature to learn like that. The way learning works the best is like when the school or whatever environment you're in, instead of like being kind of like a factory, it's more like a fertile ground from which you can grow, because every person is different. They have different background, they have different passions and interests, so like every person will kind of grow in a bit of different way. And like my goal with Resonite is to kind of provide that kind of fertile ground where people can pretty much do whatever like you want. And as part of that process, a lot of people end up like learning really cool things that I feel like a lot of them don't even realize can help like outside of Resonite too. Like, you learn a lot of like concepts from programming, game design, 3D graphics, the linear algebra, that stuff you can use outside of here. So that's just the general concepts. So it's a little bit harder to kind of pinpoint like I would say like the earliest things were some of the kind of like some of the key elements on like because like a lot of the demos kind of they had like they had some element of of that like kind of exploration, but also like able like to kind of influence the world like you're in, having some creative tools and just being able to do a lot of kind of diverse stuff. So it's really hard like to pinpoint like a very specific kind of feature, because like it was a gradual process, and it was kind of like a lot of things just kind of coming into one. Like I've used you know I've used like you know, concepts I was working, you know, during high school, you know, making the engine. I was using like, you know, concepts and skills from doing the architectural design, because I was, you know, designing stuff like programming languages and like process architectures and so on. And they were just kind of like, I like to just say, you know, like Resonite essentially. It's for example, it's like literally like taking the things I was making and just going like smoosh, like all the things I like working on just kind of smooshed into one. And that's kind of like, you know, what Froox engine and what Resonite is. But yeah, there's like there's a lot. I could like keep talking about this a fair bit, but I don't want to like, you know, ramble forever, because there's just a lot of different things that kind of coming into it. But I hope that kind of answers the question a bit and gives you like, you know, a bit more like kind of background on how this all kind of came together. Next question is from Dusty Sprinkles. In reference to packing components, that would be basically adding the components as additional behavior to the nodes that they don't already have to make additional packages, interfaces, since there's some functionality that doesn't exist in Flux that does in components. This is referring to you asking me to expand on what I meant by picking components. Basically, just want to be able to build behavior with components and Flux and just be limited to just one. So there's a little bit. I see what you mean. Like I see. Like I can understand the question better now. I'm just kind of like different ways to approach it, because the problem is, you know, components that kind of exist like in a different world. They exist in a different world from protoflux. So it's like, you know, like you cannot pack them in the same way. What you would probably be closest to do stuff like this is a prefab system. Because with that, you know, you can essentially create like templates for entire objects, and then, you know, create like instances of those. Because components, they like they just kind of like, I don't know how to put it. Like when you pack like, you know, protoflux, what you'll be able to do with nested nodes is you kind of create a template. And then you can make instances of that template, you know, and those instances, they're actually just live instances that are doing stuff. With components, the template, it's sort of the source code, you know, the template sort of exists implicitly, and the components you place on things are also like those instances. So if we wanted to like package things together, like you cannot have, you know, the problem is you cannot have a component just exist in isolation. Components, they need to be attached, you know, to particle slot. They can operate with it, they operate within the scene. They do not exist in sort of this abstract way. Versus nodes, they can. You know, nodes, they have like a behavior that's not really reliant on like which slot they're on, at least most nodes don't. Like, you know, say like if you have some mathematical function, you can package that, it has standard input, it has standard output, you know, and you can then place instances of that into other stuff and then wire it into actual stuff in the scene. You can't really do that with components, you know, the component needs to be instanced. So you cannot really, you know, pack it in the same sense you could do it with the nodes. Because it just doesn't exist in that abstract state. But the system for prefabs would probably do the best, where, you know, the prefab, it uses the peg nodes and it also has like, you know, component setup, and we just kind of create instances of it, like more easily. So I would say that's probably the best approach for this. But you won't be able to like, you know, peg them in the same way you can with protoflux nodes. If there's like some functionality that's kind of like missing, it might be worth like, you know, making like a GitHub request. We tend to like have the components do more kind of a little bit more complex stuff, and whereas the protoflux nodes, they're more more basic building blocks. But it kind of depends, you know, on the specifics what you want. Oh, no, yeah, the question shows, so I can skip this. Grand UK is asking, what are your thoughts on Molecule and what it could mean for end users and the team? So Molecule is actually one of those things I'm kind of thinking about prioritizing after the performance update is done, like very early on. It's just for people like who don't know, Molecule is essentially our planned sort of like version tracking, change tracking, update, like distribution system. Like on a high level, it's a thing where you can create like applications and like you can push new versions and then like have it like track updates, resolve updates, do stuff like that. The goal for it is to be very general, so it can be used both by us and it can be used by everyone in the community for your own content. For Resonite, the primary initial use case will be to actually have our own update, and launcher kind of system, where whenever we make a new build, it gets pushed into Molecule along, with a list of changes, and then Molecule kind of, tracks what changed over multiple builds, and have it sort of automate a lot of stuff that's, kind of manual. Like right now, for example, release notes is something, I compile manually. We do like pretty much the messages you see in the changelog, they're very similar. In most cases, they're like one-to-one to what's part of the commit messages when commits are pushed into the repository. But oh, my bubble accident. But I still have to kind of copy them, put them into release notes, and compile, make sure everything's right, and so on. What I want to do is that whenever there's a new commit, it's also going to start a process. It builds, it makes the build, it pushes into Molecule, it becomes available to like switch to that build, which is going to help with testing, because when we're like working on multiple things, we have multiple branches, you can be, okay, I want to switch to the gassing splitting branch, make sure that works. Or maybe we're working, the invite request, like I want to switch to that branch, test things work. Or we're working on the dynamic lighting or the audio system. We can just switch between multiple branches because oftentimes there's, multiple people on the team working on things in parallel, and we only have like one pre-release branch, and updating it is, kind of takes effort and causes a lot of overhead. So it will help, like, with stuff like that. It's gonna make testing easier. It's gonna make, stuff easier for us as developers. It's gonna make it easier for you because we can be, okay, we're testing these multiple things. We want to please give this thing a test, make sure, your content doesn't break. That way, we can catch more things earlier than we can do right now. Because sometimes, we push something, it breaks something, then we have to, like, hotfix it. This will help us, make that happen less often. It still might, like, it'll probably happen because even in pre-release, people don't catch everything. But it's just gonna make it, like, easier. It's gonna make it easier for us because once, for example, things are merged, instead of, like, having to compile the changelog manually, I'll just be like, the system's automatically gonna see, okay, this is the previous version, this is the new version. It collects all the changes and just builds a changelog, formats it, for different things, formats it for Steam, formats it for Discord, and so on. That's gonna, save a lot of time, save a lot of, like, human error, like, with those things happening. One of the things I do want to do is, like, say it automatically collects all the reporters. So it looks at the GitHub issue, parses that, makes a list of users who kind of, contributed to that issue. Just kind of, like, automates a lot of stuff that has to be manual right now. So from high level, like, just, what we do, it's gonna simplify a lot of our work. It's gonna reduce errors, human mistakes that happen. It's gonna make it easier to run tests for things, between, between, like, different kind of branches. We can, run multiple tests in parallel. Even, like, smaller changes can be easily tested. If something does break, it's gonna make it easier for you to just be, like, roll back a build, and, and wait for us to kind of fix things. So, like, we don't have to, like, do things like crazy rash. It also make it easier, like, if we found a bug and we think it's a regression, we can be, okay, can you test it on this build? So you switch back to that build, test it, see if it broke, and then we have, like, a better information on when it broke, and it can help towards, fixing regressions. So it's gonna help in that regard. in general, it's also going to make it so you can, run the Resonite without using Steam. And it's going to be huge for headless too, because you essentially be able to, just like use the utilities automatically manage, headless for you, like, update it and so on, and you don't have to wait on Steam. Because that's another thing that happens is, we push an update to Steam, and then, some people just don't get it for a bit because it takes a while to propagate, and they keep restarting Steam and it doesn't give them new version, and it just makes it like, painful. With this, it's just gonna fetch the exact version you want. It's gonna make that easier. More long term, what it's gonna do is you'll be able, to use it for your own items. Say, for example, you build an item like a gadget or avatar or something, and you want to publish updates to it. You'll be able to do that through Molecule as well. So if you make changes to the avatar, you just push new update. It's gonna help you, tracking changes. It's gonna, generate change logs for people. It can even be smart. So like, if somebody has a version of the avatar and they want to see, okay, what's different between my version of this avatar and this new updated one, is automatically going to look at the difference between the versions and build a changelog specifically for that user. So it'll help, like, automate all of this stuff. If you use it also specifically, once we have, the protoflags, protoflags like nested nodes, you'll be able to use it, for to version track libraries. So say like you build a big library of, functionality for protoflags for people to use, and you release like, a version of it, and you want to release updates. You can have, Molecule resolve, whatever the version like is needed. So like, if you have a world and it's using a particle version and you release some minor fixes, you can have it configured like where it always loads the latest version of that, of that particle library of protoflags that you made. Or WebAssembly once we have support for it as well. But it's not gonna, automatically update a major version unless, you configure it to do that. So in some ways, from your perspective, it's also gonna serve as a, like if you're familiar with NuGet, from C# or Cargo, it's gonna serve some of that role as well. And the goal is just in general make it very generic system, so it can be useful both for Resonite itself. Resonite is just gonna be like an application, but like a lot of the version tracking, updating, that's gonna be, it's a general functionality that a lot of things could use. And for something, like making libraries of things, with protoflags nodes and with WebAssembly, is very important, to have like some kind of like versioning system. So long term it's gonna be a very useful tool, but short term it's gonna help us a lot. It's one of those things like, like where internally like we've lost a lot of time, like probably days or even longer, dealing with some issues, with like branches and testing and some other stuff, just because we lack some of the tooling to make those things easier. So once it's kind of implemented, it's gonna, remove a lot of strain. That's gonna make it easier for us to focus, on actually building things. It's gonna reduce number of errors that happen. And it's gonna make it easier to like, update the Resonite, switch to different branches and versions and so on. So it's one of those things like, we really need internally. So it's probably like one of those things that's gonna be picked up like after the performance update, like probably very early-ish. One more thing I want to mention with it, we'll probably make at least parts of it like open, because I would like to make, if you have like a custom launcher, just make it open. Make it like, so you can kind of build your own versions with it, you can build upon it. There's gonna be kind of a lot of like an extra like, like for community contributions, because we've done it like with some projects, like for example, go.resonite.com, that's open. And our community, has been like contributing a lot of really cool things to it, making like better for everyone. So we want to like, follow that kind of model for things. But yeah, that's I hope that's kind of good ramble on the good enough ramble on Molecule. It's definitely a system I'm personally like excited for, and like I'm just like, it's been so many cases where I'm like, I wish we had this because we need this. Oh, one more thing. we can make it so like there's also like, workflows when we push a new build, it's gonna push it, to Steam, but we could also introduce more like platform distributions. If there's like a script, it's like, oh, we've made a new Resonite version, and we push, for example, the headless into like Linux like repos, have like a script, or maybe push builds on itch.io and publish them to other places, because now it's automated. It's gonna make it way easier to do, stuff like that. There's a lot. I recommend checking the GitHub issue. It has like a lot of kind of information. Grand Linux mentioned listening. Yes, but yeah, that's pretty much like kind of covers a lot of stuff at the molecule. The GitHub issue has like a lot of information too, if you're like interested. Next one is Jack the Fox Otters asking, if there could be one and only one feature you want to have Resonite that you could just summon into existence the way you design it without having to put in the work, what would it be? I mean, I feel that's kind of like of a cheat question, because what I would probably do in that case is make a feature that has like, full brain, interface, where literally it can read your thoughts and you can make everything happen just from your thoughts. You're like, I want this to exist, and it just exists. Because that's almost like, the ultimate goal of Resonite is making like whatever you imagine, make it reality. So if you could do that, then like everything else is solved. Like you just make reality is whatever you want it to be. But like it's kind of a cheat. Like it's like more realistically, like it's I mean, there's like multiple different ways to interpret the question too, because like it's also like this assumes there's a hardware for it, kind of like brain-computer interface. So it's like I mean, if you're like in the magic territory, it's just kind of summoned, like I guess that makes sense. But maybe like you want just features that are, yeah, it's kind of like infinite wishes. If you were like thinking about like feature, like if just like a feature is currently on the roadmap or something, I don't know. It's like it's kind of hard. It would probably be something I don't want to work on, because I do like a lot of features. I do like working on them, and like I don't actually I wouldn't like skipping that process. It's something more realistically. It would be something I don't want to work on. I would say, maybe a replacement for like locomotion animation, because like I'm just like very tired with that one, and it's like I'm just like we could just like snap and make it better. Like that would save like a lot of kind of sanity. Yeah, there's like. I would have to kind of look, like, because, like, there's not too many features that I don't want to super work on. Yeah, this is a difficult question. It's like multiple ways to kind of interpret it. Like, I mean, my answer is that, it's just sort of like brain-computer interface, like we reach the Resonite singularity or something, instantly, and then we have no more... it's all just pure creation, and whatever we imagine, whatever worlds we want to build, they're part of it. So it kind of depends. Could the feature be kind of like magical? Yeah, I guess that kind of answers the question. Hopefully, if you got follow up on this one, let me know. But that's what I have on this. Next one is Fuzzy Bipolar Bear is saying, hard to believe this all started some 9 years ago. After Sideline the Chair, it both feels like just last year and at the same time forever ago. Progress has been incremental over years and seems to be getting faster and faster. Do you feel that things are going at a good pace, or would you like to progress faster but at more risk of breaking things, or slower, more focus on specifics? It's actually started even before Sideline the Chair. Because even Sideline the Chair, it wasn't the first Sideline I made. There was like one I made in the 2013 like Oculus Game Jam, and I made like a bunch of like demos, even like and like apps before then. So it's like a lot of this kind of stems like, you know, way further back, and part of it is like, you know, I I just kind of like, you know, like project that just kind of continues and continues and continues, because like some of the earliest stuff I actually built, like, you know, for DK1, there was like this kind of solar system kind of like visualization thing. And it was the funniest thing is, you know, like there's stuff, you know, from there that's still kind of like, you know, in here. It's like part of this. Like there's literally things that are like super old, and like there's like bits of them, you know, still kind of part, because like it's just like a thing that kind of like accumulated over time, and like I mentioned earlier, it kind of like merged together into this like one big snowball. I would definitely like say I wouldn't. Personally, I would like mind. So it's kind of difficult because like sometimes things takes longer. Like for example, with photon dust, it took longer than I hoped for, and big part of it was, you know, preserving things and making sure that things keep working. You know, that we don't break, you know, user content. That's one of our big philosophies. Is it like, you know, one of our core principles? So we will put a lot of effort into making sure that doesn't happen. And I put a lot of effort into photon dust, and it made things take longer. And I wish like it could fake faster, but you know, it took however long it took. But it's a principle, like, you know, that like I will break only in very rare cases. Like it would have to be like something substantial. So I would say I would not want to break those things. You know, like I would want it to go faster, but I don't want to break people's stuff, because I love, like, you know, preserving things and making sure they work for as long as possible. What I would actually want us to have in this case is like once we grow enough, have people who, like, you know, where their sole responsibility is, you know, backwards compatibility preserving. You know, to figure out why some things broke, what broke them, figure out how to fix it. Kind of, you know, just do general kind of like upkeep. Do general kind of upkeep of, like, you know, like making sure things keep working. And it's like thing that happens relatively rarely. Like it happens, but like if you consider, you know, the amount of features, the mass of everything, Resonite is designed to break things as little as possible. But like having some people, you know, kind of like help with that, like, you know, when it happens, that will help, because like it's something I don't super enjoy in working. And like in some regards, it's fun, because like it's almost like for example with photon dust, it's kind of like it feels like how do I put it? It feels like, you know, when people make emulators and you slowly make more things of the game you want to run with it work. And it's kind of like that, but at the same time, it can be quite a drag a lot of times, just because it's like, oh no, there's another issue, and there's another issue, and there's another issue, and I just want to be done with it, but there's more issues, but I will fix them, because the commitment to backwards compatibility, and I don't want people's stuff to break. So yeah, like it depends on some things. Like there are some things which I do feel are okay to break, like sometimes, like but there are things, you know, that don't have like a user content built on them. Like for example, we design a new system, and the new system, maybe it likes some features of the previous system, but overall, like, you know, it helps us, like, you know, move faster and kind of moves us forward. So for cases like that, I wish, like, you know, there's like one part, like, I wish people would be more kind of tolerant of that kind of stuff, like, because it kind of, sometimes you do have to like lose certain features, as long as it's not features that, you know, break something you build. It just kind of changes the workflow a bit. Like, you know, I wish like we can like do those a bit like faster, like, you know, do like, that's the area like where I'd be okay, like, you know, moving faster with kind of like a bit more like breakage, because right now it's kind of blocking a lot of things. Like for example, you know, a lot of the nodes or a lot of the components, they are not organized well right now. They're kind of like, it's a bit of a mess, and we want to like reorganize them. The problem is, whenever we touch where they are, people get upset. You know, they're like, oh, like my muscle memory broke and so on. So it kind of slows that down. It's something that like, you know, would help us improve, make the change now, but like, you know, that's making it slower, because now in order to deal with that, we need to rework the whole UI, we need to add search, which is gonna take a longer time than just, you know, having somebody update the categories. And it kind of slows down the progress in some ways. So that's like, you know, one of those things where I would want to like work, where I want to like work faster, but kind of depends. But yeah, it depends on what it is. Like in general, like I would want to like work as fast as we can. But also like, you know, there's like certain lines like I will like not cross, like breaking like a lot of the compatibility stuff in particular. Or like, you know, designing things, like taking shortcuts, like, and not like designing things just going with your first idea, because that has cumulative effect. But I hope that kind of answers the question. Fuzzy Bubble Bro, I had existence of Neos back in the alpha testing days, I joined 2017, have seen so much progress over years, and I'm always impressed with how far it's come. Keep asking myself what would I want to add, but then these things get added, like the camera follow me mode and the upcoming sound system. Yay, sound system. Yeah, it's like, I've been like working like VR stuff like for a long time now, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, it's one of those things, you know, where like you look, like when you're like working on things, it doesn't feel that fast. Like there's like a saying that like, you know, a lot of people, they can overestimate what they can do in a year, but they underestimate what they can do in a decade. In some sense, like that, you're like, you know, like wish like you kind of did more things that kind of feel slow at the time, but then you look, you know, you look back and you're like, there's actually a good chunk of stuff that have been done. So it's something I kind of recommend do it, like, you know, for a lot of people, because there's, you know, people who feel like they're making no progress and improvement, like if they're learning something, you know, they're learning programming, learning, you know, art and whatnot. Because usually when you're learning something or building something, it takes a while, and it's almost like it's like watching grass grow. Like if you go there and if you like pay attention to it, like you're not gonna see it grow. It's so slow. But you're gonna wait like, you know, a month or two, and you compare the two, and you see, oh, it's actually grown quite a bit. So a lot of, you know, progress kind of feels like that, and it's also gonna feel like that if you know, learning new things. And there's actually one thing also, like, you know, there's a saying with programming is like, programmers, if they look at a code they wrote like 6 months ago, they'll be like, who wrote that? That's horrible code. And they'll be like, oh, it was me. And people, I always feel like people like find it almost like negative, but like, I think like, you know, when that happens, it's actually positive, because what it means in those 6 months, you've grown and you've improved, and you know, like better ways to do things, which is why you can see like, you know, the flaws with things you did like 6 months ago. Because if you were at the same skill level, you'd be like, you know, you'd see like the code the same as the one you wrote recently. So it's not a bad thing. It also doesn't mean that, you know, the code doesn't have value, because it's still like, you know, does things and it's still like useful. You can do things better, and you know, sometimes you kind of circle back to things and rewrite them with more knowledge. And it's kind of what happened a lot with Resonite too. Is like, you know, there's a lot of things where I circled back and was like, okay, like I have much more knowledge, much more experience. I'm gonna redesign this whole system, you know. But one thing that helps is like I kept things modular, so like it's very easy to just swap out different systems and just plug a different one, which makes those rewrites, you know, easy to do. Which makes it like, you know, like once you kind of get more experience, you know, help kind of improving things over time. And yeah, the sound system kind of, I'm getting a bit like excited to work on it. It's pretty much the last big kind of, you know, standing before, you know, the splitting, as I like to call it. So, and once it's done, you know, it's gonna be happening. Next question is from Dusty Sprinkles. I'm looking forward to the common comment component rework is my favorite Unity connector. What's your Froox? I don't know what you mean by a rework, because it's like there's not really any rework planned for it. I mean, I would say my favorite Unity connector is none, because they're gonna explode. They'll be gone. The way Froox Engine communicates to Unity is essentially gonna, like, there's gonna be fundamentally reworked with, you know, the split. So it's not gonna, like, that whole system is gonna be overhauled. And I kind of like originally designed like the system, I think, because like I wanted to keep it modular and kind of switch between things more easily, but make it like the binding very dynamic. But there was like these systems like exist for a long time. It's actually more beneficial to have them more tightly bound. So like, you know, like it's one of those things where like I originally designed with some things and I would kind of like look at things, I'm like, okay, this is not the best way to do it. I'm gonna like just overhaul the whole system. Yes. This also actually runs out of all the questions right now, and let me check the time. There's like still 40 minutes left, so if you've got any questions, you know, feel free to ask. I will maybe ramble about things. I do see some more comments. Timbit, that's a problem I have. Don't get into Resonite as often as I would like, and by the time I get back on, I forget everything I learned. I mean, that can happen. Sometimes things gotta change a bit. That's can be tricky. Maybe like if you're like gonna stay around a bit, like some things will kind of stick over time, because like everything kind of changes. Yeah, but Fuzzy is saying Resonance skills is like a muscle that can atrophy. So Fuzzy is saying inward microphones is something I've been waiting for years, looking forward to them. Yeah, I think it'll be cool. Like, you know, I can make like remember that video of like, you know, like the binaural haircut thing, like make something like that, you know, in Resonite, just record like you'll be able to record like ASMR videos, you know, with the microphone and stuff. Actually, the other part where it's going to be really helpful is, you know, with the camera, because you'll be able to also render and stream the audio from the viewpoint of the camera fully spatialized, including my voice. Because right now you're hearing my voice actually from OBS, you're not hearing it at all from Resonite, because, you know, it's not being outputted on my end. But we'll be able to, like, you know, just render it spatialized and output it to you know, another audio device that you can, you know, then stream. So yeah, it's like one thing actually I have like an issue, like, so I'm gonna talk a little bit more, you know, about the audio system, like rework, because one of the things I would really like to add, and Steam Audio supports this, is ability, you know, to use the inward geometry for, like, you know, audio occlusions, reverberation, and so on, because it can add a lot of extra realism to things. And like, it's one of those things I'm like it's gonna be really cool. It's gonna make a really audio immersive worlds and so on. But at the same time, it'll take a bit of a chunk of time. So I'm like, do I want to do it now? Because it's gonna delay the performance a bit. And it's like the performance is probably a bigger thing, and I'm still kind of feeling it out, because like once I work more with the library, I'll feel out, you know, how big of a task it is. And I'm kind of hoping it's gonna be like, okay, this seems simple enough. I'll just do it, like, you know, in this chunks, and I'm already, like, you know, knee deep in the audio system. But I don't know at this point. Like, I don't know, like, you know, how complex is it gonna be exactly. So we'll see. I'm kind of hoping it might happen, but like I'll have to feel it out because. It'd be a really cool feature to add, a really cool, like, you know, extra treat, but also, like, you know, dealing other things. Fuzzy Popular is also saying, I'm thinking of multiple camera angles we can already do, multiple sound sources, is the next logical thing. Yeah, like, you'll be able, like, we might make it, like, you know, so you can just render, like, how many audio sources you want, although, you might end up, like, if you have like too many, you might end up like, the audio ends up like glitching. Like once the system is too overloaded, it'll essentially need to spend more time computing things, than the audio takes to play, and then it just doesn't keep up. Suffice is recommending try dropping in Creator Jam each Sunday, make friends there, you learn stuff while you build. Yeah, Creator Jam is great, like if you want to learn a bunch of stuff in Resonite, Creator Jam is a great place to do it. It's open to all skill levels, some people there, like they'll be like, Protoflex Wizard and level design wizards and stuff like that. And while some people like, brand new to Resonite, but everybody can contribute. And everybody learns, from each other, which kind of, circles back to the whole free-to-learn thing, people of different skill levels, different age groups, all interacting with each other in a social environment, are learning from each other, and it's, like, beautiful to see. And it's a good place to kind of pick up skills. Yeah. So, since there's, like, no more questions, I should probably ramble about something. I don't know what to ramble about. I could like do, I talk about the audio system a bit. As mentioned discussion on the Creator Jam. I could cover one thing I've kind of wanted to talk about a bit. Because I wanted to like, there's like some topics I wanted to kind of cover. With, what's it called? With like how we kind of prioritize things and what we kind of ask for certain things. And I wanted to add like, some diagrams that might help. Also, Butler is asking or saying the Wednesday workshops for Metaverse Academy are also very cool for this kind of collaborative learning. Yeah, like learning from each other is like really cool. Since like there's no questions, I think I'll do like the blurb. Let me stand up. Oop. And not hit things. I have prepared an area in this world. I have my brush here, there we go. And I can move the camera over here. I put it like in this cloud because it's like, nice. It's nice, and solid, like pretty much like solid color. And make sure I got this thing. There we go. So what I wanted to kind of cover, so there's like one thing you can see on our GitHub, is, how to make issues. And one of the reasons like why we can be quite strict about some things, for example, providing good description, providing logs, providing like information, is because it can save us a lot of time. And we as developers, our time is limited. Say like, this is all the time in the day. This is 1 day of work. And what happens is, it's also like, is it legible? Like things that looks legible. This is 1 day of work, and there's only, this much that you can fit in here to do in this day. And what happens is, like, think of issues, as having a size. So say, like, you make a GitHub issue and it's like this size, this is how much of work it takes. And say you have like a bunch of these. I'm gonna duplicate these. Put this here. I can fit one more. I'm gonna duplicate this. So these are, the issues I can fit into the day. So if they're like, this size, say these, each one take like an hour. I don't know if this doesn't quite work out, but like, the exact numbers don't matter. But, say like these work this way, and say this is your issue. And you really want this issue to be done. Say if somebody who made this issue, doesn't follow a lot of the things, like we can ask them to, and what it can end up doing, and this actually happened a lot. There's been like literally issues which normally would have been like, 5-minute fix in some cases. They've been like very quick because they didn't provide our information, didn't follow the things. It ended up taking us hours. What it ends up doing is it makes this issue, instead of being this big, it makes it this big. So if these were the issues I was gonna handle during the day, and this issue becomes this, you see what happens is this gets pushed out. Actually, I'm just gonna... This gets pushed out. This gets pushed out. This gets pushed out, which is, the thing you wanted. And this, maybe I can fit it at the end of the day. And now these issues, either, they will have to be pushed to another day, but then, the same thing happens. Whatever I was gonna work on that day is now pushed out. Or they just never get done. They just, end up being dropped. And just because, this issue suddenly took way more time than it otherwise would have. And this thing, tends to kind of happen a lot, which is like, why we ask people to do, what they can to make the issues as small as possible on our end. Because the smaller they are, the more, we can kind of fit in every day, and the more stuff we can get done. But unfortunately, like, a lot of times, like, this kind of thing ends up happening to the issues. Sometimes we can kind of see it also coming, because, like, there's some issues, somebody, like, say, like, I have, like, these, and somebody submits an issue, and they're like, okay, I wanted to, like, and they add multiple things into that issue, which is one of the things we ask people, if we have multiple requests, separate into, separate issues. Because, say, like, you have, like, one request in the issue, and it's, like, this amount of work, and then you're like, I also wanted to do this, and the other thing is this amount of work. And I'm kind of looking at that issue, and I'm like, well, if you want to do the whole thing as once, I'm not gonna fit this in here, like, this won't fit, this is too much work. If you make these two separate issues, maybe this, this can get done right away, and you get, the first part of what you wanted, and this, have to figure out, maybe I put it on another day. Maybe this part won't get done, maybe we won't prioritize it, but at least you get this. But if we want multiple things, if we want this thing to be done as a whole, and it doesn't need to be whole, then, maybe this whole thing doesn't fit at all, into the time we have. And it doesn't get prioritized. It's gonna happen, like, it can look different, because sometimes people, like, they want multiple things, so it's like a bunch of stuff that's, like, smaller, and if each one of these was a separate issue, like, if this were, like, split, then, maybe this one can get one day, this one gets another day, maybe these two, but, like, if you want it to be done as a whole chunk, you kind of group these together, and you don't allow them to be split up. Now it's much harder, to kind of fit into the amount of time we have. And now it doesn't get prioritized as a result, even though if we took, just one of these, so like it's one of these, this would get prioritized. And maybe, this other one would get prioritized. So think about, like, things like in this kind of terms, because that's, how I often think about them, in my own head when I'm kind of deciding what issues to prioritize, which issues not to prioritize. And we're kind of dealing with things like, when we ask, for certain things, and, like, it ends up, like, being kind of source of friction, it's because, it oftentimes, like, ends up, like, leading to that. Instead of, like, leading to small issues becoming way bigger issues, and then pushing out other things. It's, I feel it might be good, like, to think about it, from the perspective of, like, that you're not, like, this issue, because, like, if you're this issue, and this issue becomes big and it pushes everything else out, like, you might not care, like, you might not care because, your issue has become big, but it still has been finished, in the day. But problem is, it's not always going to be the case. Your issue might be this issue, the one that end up being, pushed away. So if, you know, if everybody spends extra effort making the issues as small as possible, you know, communicating kind of well, respecting the guidelines, you make every issue smaller, it decreases the chance that your issue is going to be the one that's going to pushed out. Is, you know, it's essentially like a courtesy, like, you know, toward, like, both to us to save our time and to everyone else. And it helps the project as a whole because, you know, now instead of being able to do just one thing in a day, we can do, you know, several of them. And we fix more issues per day. We make more people happy. You know, we make the platform like better than, you know, by just fixing one issue. Like, you know, fix 5 or 10 or however many. And that just overall kind of helps the project. So I hope this kind of visualization kind of helps, you know, understand a bit better. Please give, like, you know, on the GitHub, give the guidelines a read, and if you can, there's also there's a whole how we prioritize, which is like this is a longer document. It goes into detail how we decide, you know, what gets prioritized, what helps, what doesn't help, and so on. If you can, give that one read as well, because that's gonna help understand, you know, the whole prioritization process a little better. It's gonna make it more efficient communicating with us and making our work on our end easier. And I hope, like, you know, putting into this sort of like visual, my thing is not tracking, putting into this, you know, visual kind of matter kind of helps understand this quite a bit. So as a request from me, give it a read. I'll probably cut this into a video. The link's probably gonna be, you know, in the description. And thank you for, like, you know, listening on this one. I'm gonna move back to the area, see if there's any more questions. Oh, there's a question. Let's see. I'm gonna go sit back down. Hi. There we go. So we have a question. Game the Capdog is asking, what do you think people will do with a mobile build when it becomes available? What do you want people to see people do with it? Mobile build, I assume, like, you mean running like on Android, running like on mobile devices like that, or do you mean like Quest? Because there's like multiple ways. There's multiple ways, you know, to kind of interpret that. I mean, in general, Quest specifically. So the mobile build's kind of interesting in some regards, because, I mean, generally, like, we would want people to do, you know, whatever they can do on the main build. Problem is, the Quest, it's a lot more, you know, limited hardware. You won't be able to do as much as you can do, you know, on your PC. It's also a lot more prone, like, if you overload it, it'll just crash. Because on PC, for example, you know, you have, you have like the virtual memory, which means you, like, if you like allocate too much stuff, it's just gonna get shoved into swap, and maybe you'll lag, you know, it won't be running as well as it could be, but you won't crash, you'll keep, you know, running, and you can delete stuff. With Quest, if you run out of memory, like, just the application crashes, which means, you know, there's more of a hard cap on how much stuff you can kind of put in. And that hard cap is way lower than it is, you know, for PC platforms. So, it's probably gonna have, like, you know, more kind of like limitations, like, but my general goal would be to have it, you know, still like the same kinds of things you do on here. You know, you just have to, like, limit, you know, amount of geometry and amount of complexity and things. But overall, like, you know, I want it to be, like, you know, kind of the same Resonite, you know, that is like for everything else. Just, you know, kind of like maybe like with more kind of like limitations that need to kind of happen due to constraints of that hardware. Because we wouldn't want to, like, turn it just into, like, you know, say, like, it's a limited mode, you can do any building, you know, you can only socialize and exist. Like, I feel that would kind of lose, you know, what Resonite is. So it's like, just, you know, what's the word? Essentially just having like, same type of experience, just more limited in ways, like on how much you can bring in. But yeah, like I don't really have like super much because like I don't think about a mobile, build much different from like normal Resonite. So like I don't really know like much what to say on this other than that. The next question is, Game Complex asking, there is a light. Yeah, it's gonna be like version of Resonite. Next question is Jack the Fox authors asking, what's your pledge/vision for Resonite's onboarding/user experience in the long run? And the way I kind of like to look at things is, the way games do tutorials, where we sort of like gamify like the basic concepts and learning things, where you learn, the core mechanics in a fun way, where you don't even realize you're kind of like, learning them. So I would like to make the initial experience to be a little bit like story-based, a little bit like, kind of environmental, kind of like more narrative, like we kind of go through a bunch of things, you learn basic like things. It's almost like, make it like, oh, you're just entering a new, universe. And like this is like the, entry experience. At the end of it, you're gonna be released into this vast universe that you can explore and do things. And like this is just to kind of like, give you the skills to be able to explore and do whatever you want with it. And at the same time, show people what can be done on the platform, make it where it's like for example, you learn like some of the basic building stuff, like, as part of like going through the experience. So overall, like I think that would be a good one. The part is, once you kind of learn the core skills, have the other like learning be more contextual, because people like to do different things. People come like, with a different mindset into Resonite. Some just wanna, hang out and socialize. Some wanna like, start building things and so on. And some things, people might not know, might not need to know, or might not care to know right away. So we don't want to overwhelm them with too much stuff. But we still want it to be like, like you can learn kind of as you go. So probably the best skill is, giving people skill, how do they actually learn more things. So then we kind of like, give them the core things, impress them what the platform can do, and give them, the resources, to keep exploring and learning more and kind of grow as they become part of the platform. Oh, the Game Cup Dog is asking for a bit of context and what potential I see in quest build. I'm thinking about things like using pass-through and multiple headsets in one room. Oh yeah, so if it comes to like features like that, like pass-through would be really cool. I mean, like it's not specific to quest. It's just, like I like to think about it, as Resonite with augmented reality mode, because, we can do it in multiple different ways. I would say like you don't even need like that, because there's like some headsets you can kind of do pass-through on desktop as well. But like I think there's like a lot of cool things, because like one of the things I really want to do at some point with augmented reality stuff is like where the pass-through, it actually maps your room, it creates like geometry, and you open your physical room as a session. And you you open it as a session, and you can invite people into it, and when they join, they will see, the scan of your room that the device has captured, so they can see, like, oh, you have a desk over here, you have like, there's a thing over here, it's like, a table or bed over here, and you'll be able to see people in their avatars in your room, just moving around, looking at things, and then you can start doing stuff, like you can be building things, you can be building some gadget with somebody who's like virtually in your room. They could be doing some protoflags that's just, floating in your room, and for them it's also in your room, except they just see it like as a mesh. So I think it's gonna open up like a lot of kind of cool interactions like that, because when I think about it, a lot of the stuff like avatars, the tools, the gadgets and things like you make, they don't depend on particular world they're in. So like they actually don't, they don't need this around, whatever is around, that can be the real world layer. And you still have your avatars, you still have your tools and things you spawn, they still like exist on top of that, the same way they kind of exist, on top of this world. So yeah, like that is like one use case I would like want to do, because it's kind of weird, like, just literally invite somebody into your room as an avatar and just see them, poke around. I've had like a little bit of that experience when I did a 3D scan of my room, because I would be like, imported in, and it's so weird just seeing place, and just seeing a bunch of avatars in it, just looking at things and being like, oh, you have this thing, and it's a really cool experience, and having that more like real time, that'd be even more fun. So just checking time, we've got 15 minutes left. There is Robots is asking, I believe you previously mentioned an issue that you wanted to run a version of Resonite without rendering, such as on Raspberry Pi. If I remember correctly, the reason was to decouple Resonite from being specialized as 3D game engine. What kind of things do you hope to achieve by doing this? By the way, when I saw that idea, I thought it would be wonderful if people using VR Resonite could easily chat with others on smartphone through Discord-like UI. So, I feel like there's like multiple things in this question. One of them, I think the one with Raspberry Pi, it has to do with the domain system. So the whole idea is like, make Resonite, like, Froox engine, be a thing that just interconnects everything. So you might want to, like, say like you build some kind of hardware that you want to connect through the real worlds, and on the Raspberry Pi you have the GPIO pins. What you could do is, you will say like you wanted to build a world where whatever's connected to those pins, has back and forth interaction. Maybe it's enabling, some devices. Maybe it's like reading some things that are affecting things in the world. And what I want to make do is like, so those pins, they're, for example, gonna be represented as, protoflex node. And you can literally just wire whatever you want into those and control those pins. And being able to, like, send the data, you could run, like, like if you wanted to, like, one way to kind of handle it, to like handle all the synchronization is literally just run Resonite on it and have that node, interface with those pins. The problem is the Raspberry Pi then has to, do everything in the session, which can be too much for it and it's kind of wasteful. With the domain system, the idea is, we can kind of create almost like subgroups, where you say, this one only has this small hierarchy. It doesn't have everything, it's just a small hierarchy, and like the Raspberry Pi, it only has that small part of hierarchy. It doesn't have all the avatars, it doesn't have the whole world, it just has that part of the node that handles the communication, with the GPIO. And, whatever is relevant to its function, that way it's much more light on it, and you can, like, and you can still kind of, like, rely on the same mechanisms for, like, synchronization that, like, Froox engine has. So being able to, like, build sort of like cool applications. Like, say, like, you wanted to build something like where people join a world, and then, they can push a button, and that button, triggers something on the GPIO. And maybe it enables, like, like a thing in your, like, some kind of hardware, like a fan, or moves a robot or something. And then, like, you feed it back into the experience and they see something from the real world, piped in. You could build, like, things like that, like, very, very easily. So, I think it's gonna, like, open up, like, kind of like cool applications. It's similar, like, you could, like, build, like, things, say, like, in your, like, for, like, museums, for example, you want to, like, make interactive experience, and you want, say, you could make something like, say, like, have a virtual globe in a world, and, like, you just pipe through protoflex, its current rotation to some, GPIO, and that controls a real globe, and you rotate the globe in VR, and it's gonna rotate the globe, in reality too, and you just connect these two easier. Because big part of Resonite is, like, it's just making interconnecting things way easier. Like you can just, plug whatever you want into whatever else you want. And being able to do that with the real world things, I feel it's just gonna expand and open a lot more possibilities. There's also the other thing is, being able to chat with people. Like, I would like us to have like an official kind of chat application. So you can kind of, you can use Resonite even like just outside, just being in VR, you can still kind of communicate with people. It has a lot of kind of like, cool features and so on. And you could talk with people who are in VR, maybe even do like a voice call and like, talk with them like that. So having that like is gonna be, I think, also like a big boon, because like it's gonna open more ways to use Resonite as a general social communication platform, and it's gonna have it like, integrated with all the other uses, because you could with app, you could take like, photo and video, you send it to a person and they can, just show it in the world, be like, oh look, this person's, doing this thing. And when we can be like, one of the things I want to do is like, so they can be on a call, like, well, not in a call. You could essentially be in a world on a low power device without all the graphics, but like, just kind of float around and, talk with people. You'll have the voice, you'll have like, basic positions, you'll see where people are, and maybe you can see basic objects like, some pictures and videos, and you can kind of share the world with others, from your phone without having to have the complex 3D world. And you could still, communicate and be part of the experience when some people are, in full VR, some people are in desktop, and some people are just on their phone, still kind of chatting with each other. Like, sometimes, like, you could kind of use it, like a Discord in a way, but, still having kind of more spatialized experience, like where, like, you hear people around you, but, like, like, instead of the whole world being loaded, everybody's represented, like, like just their avatars, or maybe, like, floating circles or something like that. And you can, put in images and videos and share things with others and so on. Have, like, a sort of, like, a simplified interface. So there's a lot of kind of cool things that could be done in that regard. It's actually one of the things that kind of bugs me, like when I'm in Discord, it's like everybody's in broadcast, they're in your ears, and like my brain just doesn't process that super well. But when the audio is spatialized, and there's like maybe two people who are like, talking, back and forth, you can just move away from them a bit, so you can still hear them in the background, but now it's no longer, making it impossible to have conversation with somebody else. So having that sort of like, almost like spatialized Discord, I think would be really cool. The next question, also, at this point, like, we might not be able to answer all of the questions if there's like more that pop in. But Space Spec is asking, I have been thinking on the concept of IMU-based toe tracking. Is it a reasonable approach to send OSC data that will represent toe angle and toe spread for some or all toes over network to the Resonite client, versus trying to get it all somehow into SteamVR's tracking system? Yeah, you could do that. Especially, I would recommend it, especially for the prototyping phase. I don't actually even know if SteamVR has any APIs for this. Probably doesn't. I don't know. But for the prototyping, I would definitely, do like whatever is the simplest thing to do. Because like when you prototype something, you just, you're not making it super robust or something. And OSC, it's very quick to do. Like, it's very easy to, like, send data. It's very easy way to receive data. So, like, if you like, I think it's a good approach. Timbit is also saying, I use push to talk on Discord. I don't like a hot mic. You can do that on Resonite too, actually. Like, you can mute yourself and then you press and hold V. That's like push to talk. So that also clears up all the questions right now. There's 6 minutes left. So actually, I have a question. Like, do you have a time for some questions, depending on how many more there are? If they're quick ones, I can do a few, but no guarantees at this point. If they're like long ones, then probably no. But feel free to ask if you get any more questions. Thank you. And it seems like people is also like very busy, finishing MMC stuff and so on. I hope like people are doing good with that. I'm actually kind of curious. This the Oh, so the next resonance is gonna be already after MMC ends. So that's gonna be on on March 2nd. Oh boy, so yeah, it's gonna be by the time there's next resonance, it'll be over. Well, it'll be over for you. It'll start for me. It's oh, like everyone's kind of doing well, like finishing up stuff and not getting too stressed. Adrios is asking, what is the funniest bug you've had to fix in Resonite? There's been like one where the blend shapes for Visemes kind of freaked out. Specifically when you were quiet, and it would essentially overdrive some of the blend shapes. So if somebody was quiet, they were not saying anything, their face would just be horribly, deformed. They would like make like very spooky looking face. Then when they would start talking, like it would be fine, and then they stop talking, and their face just contorts. And that's been like I remember like when I went in and I saw that thing happening, I'm like I know it needs to be fixed, but I can't stop laughing right now. So I would say probably that. There's usually bugs like that, like funny. There's like some that like where I'm like, that's no longer a bug, it's a feature. Just keeping that. Ooh, Marty SH is asking, what's your favorite type of cheese? I do have like cheese I like quite a lot. It's a Czech cheese. It's called Twaróžek. It's very smelly. And like, I do have a picture of it. I don't have the smell vision of it. This is this one. This is a very good cheese. It's very pungent. So it's like, and people are very split on it. Like people will either love this cheese or they'll hate it and say it smells like poop. So I don't think there's any in between. But one of the Czech cheeses, it's very tasty. At least to me. I like kind of strong flavors. If you get a chance, like get this cheese. But yeah, that's my favorite cheese. Epic Easton is asking, are you an expert in protoflags? I mean, depends what sense, because the funny thing is I don't use protoflags, as much as like a lot of people on here, because I usually don't get super much time to build things. And like I kind of like, because I wrote the system, I know like very intricately how it works. But like some of that is like when I build stuff, I kind of have to think about it for a bit. I have to be like, okay, this works this way, I'm gonna do this way. Versus like people who build stuff a lot with it, they have like they know where all the nodes are, all the kind of like tricks and things, and they have like very fast workflow. I don't have very fast workflow, but pretty much like whatever we could build with protoflags, I would like figure out like a way to do it, because like I know how it kind of works in general. So like I would say in some sense yes. I know like how it works like internally. I like I've wrote most of the nodes. So it's so in a sense yes, and in a sense no, depending how kind of look at it. Do business clients have the fun? Marshesh is asking, do business clients have the funny nodes? Yes. It's all like all the same. So far nobody complains. So. But with that, it's pretty much like last minute, so I think that's all the time we have for today. If you have like more questions and like you would like to ask them in advance, keep eye on the office hours in our Discord. We open up like not just for this one, but also for other ones. We open the questions ahead of time, so you can you can ask them, especially if you cannot attend. So that's way to kind of get them in like early on. But yeah, thank you very much, for joining. Thank you, for watching and asking questions and listening to my answers and rambles and everything. And I hope like everybody everybody has like the time like kind of finishing the MMC projects. I can't wait to start like going through them and seeing all the cool stuff that you've made. So I'm kind of excited for that. And also for everybody who supports on Patreon, thank you so much. And for everybody who switched to Stripe, thank you so much too. It's been kind of slowly growing. For those of you who don't know, Stripe is now a new kind of alternative to Patreon. Or I wouldn't even say alternative, because we actually prefer people use Stripe, because we get larger percentage from the money you send. So even if you're at if you switch to the same level from Patreon to Stripe, we get more money as a result. Because Stripe on average takes about 5%, Patreon on average takes about 15%. Which means if everybody who's currently on Patreon switch to Stripe, we will get a few $1,000s a month extra, which we can then use to like improve the project some more. So thank you very much. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for watching, and I'll have to figure out who to rate. Is anybody streaming that I can see? Let me check. Where am I gonna send you? Oh no, there's not even Creator Jam streaming. What am I gonna do? I guess, and also, yeah, Godless asks, saying, you don't need Stripe account to support Resonite through it, you just use your Resonite account. It makes things way easier. Godly, he pretty much did make sure to have the implementation of it. And so thank you again, Godly. And yeah, it makes things way simpler. The process is, you just sign in, you select the tier. Once it kind of processes the payment, usually you have your benefits, within a minute. It's way better than Patreon. And yeah, Fuzzy Bipolar Bear, I plan to swap Stripe on 28th. Yay. So, unfortunately, there's nobody streaming Resonite right now. So I guess this is where it ends. I'm sorry. Just the stream just ends here. I don't have anywhere to send you. Thank you very much for watching, and bye bye. Wow.